Hey everyone. I know it's been a couple months, more like several, since I last did a video, especially for elementary. And I know I still have about 6 episodes left to do. I am going to do 3 episodes right now, and then um, do the last three probably next weekend. But I just wanted to, finish season 7 of Elementary. So I am starting with episode 8 called Misunderstood. It has to do with this girl named Cassie Lenu, um, who impersonated a a girl who had gone missing at the age of like 7 or 8 or something like that. And and tried to get in tight with the family because whatever reason she had. And then she did this back in season. She said it was. They said it was 4 years prior to the episode, so that would have been 2016. So just I think it was like season 5 or 4. I want to say. I don't quite remember. Let's see, that was season 4. So, um, essentially, they found out that she was lying and all that, and so they put her away for fraud. Um, and she ended up serving her sentence, and then so now she's back. Basically, she's back now, and um, she claims that there's a woman who was murdered named Heather Foley. And Heather supposedly was one of Cassie's foster moms. They initially don't believe her, but then decide to figure out who killed her. Um, they find out that the gunshot has no matches in the database. Um, and as Joan goes to meet other clients, Sherlock and Cassie decide to go meet with Heather's husband, Judd. Um, at Judd's house, they find out that Heather kept getting phone calls and leaving at all hours of the night. And so Judd, they thought that, she was having an affair, but um, that's not the case. Um, she, she used to work at this plant nursery, but then um, after marrying Judd, decides to um, go to this company that buys and sells baby formula named Formula Share. Heather stumbles across a seller of a formula, and she starts getting suspicious of this person. So she talks to this woman named Meredith S., as we later find out is called Meredith Sagehorn. And Meredith says that, she's going to look into it. Um, they realize that, or Cassie realizes that Sherlock wasn't saying everything around Judd. So it's then that they realize that there's 2 cops nearby and go talk with them. Cops' names are Detective Owen Calabrese and Rhea Farad. They're investigating the baby formula that has been stolen, and I guess sold on a black market or something, or sold, resold or something like that. Um, and so they think that Heather's colleagues, or people involved in this uh, baby formula ring, um, were suspicious or found out that she was suspicious and killed her. Um, and so Calabrese, flipped Heather to get to Meredith Satorn, who they think is the head of the organization. Um, so let's see. Essentially, um, when Meredith Satorn is brought in to be interviewed, um, Joan finds out from Cassie that she thinks a woman named Pamela Fremont, who Sherlock slept with, got pregnant with her, and that would make Sherlock her father. Um, but she asked Joan not to say anything until she said something to Sherlock, so um, that's why she's really there. But who knows if that's really the reason. Um, Turns out that this man named Mac Leahaven, I don't know whether he's the CEO of a company that makes baby formula or is a CEO of a company who sells baby formula. But either way, he's one of those CEOs, and he stands to make a lot of money if baby formula is priced very high. And there will, according to everyone, there will be a vote to um, make baby formula not as expensive, and so therefore he would not make as much money, and so um, killed he killed Heather so that the vote wouldn't happen, because I guess she was going to convince people to vote otherwise. Um, and so that's and so Calabrese, the detective, was Lee Hoven's. Oh, I can't want to say Lee Haven. Lee Hoven. He was Lee Hoven's fixer. So essentially, he killed her. So for him and all that. So um, that was episode 8. On to episode 9, which is called On the Scent. Joan is looking into a murder of a guy in Arizona because she thinks the guy who was killed was going to use samples of botulism to poison um, a lot of people, essentially. And she thinks that Odin Reichenbach had this man killed. Um, Sherlock tries to persuade her not to go rock the boat because NSA already has an investigation open, and pretty much we know that he still hasn't told her about what the NSA said or McNally said, which was that he had no intention of trying to bring down Reichenbach, and planned on helping him actually. Um, so Joan tries to confront him about it, but he doesn't really give an answer. And he is saved by the chime of a text message, um, or chime of a call or whatever. Um, Turns out there was a serial killer called the Ghost of Brooklyn, who killed, I think, 3 people over the span of like 5 to 8 years, I want to say. Um, and it looks like he has resurfaced, and that's why they were called. It looks like he killed this woman named Caroline Gibbs, who is an artist. Um, Sherlock and Marcus talked to one of the victim's fathers, one of the victim's father, Megan Hutchins. So the father thought Megan's then husband killed her because he was there the night she was killed. Um, and while they're talking with him, Joan talks with Carson Mayfield, um, an art gallery owner who staged fights slash arguments with Caroline to start controversy between for her and make everyone want to come to an exhibition that they were putting together. Carson then says, "Well, there's this neighbor named Benjamin Long arguing with who he saw arguing with Caroline, and who he thinks she was having an affair with." Um, And then we get this big bombshell where Sherlock thinks this man named Albert Wu is actually the ghost. He's this elderly man who um, started working on a factory floor of a company called MedTech, who supplies DNA evidence kits to the NYPD. While working on the factory floor, he would help put together these kits and all that. And he started working there in 1999, which was a year before the first murder. And he has this condition called hydrotosis, I think it is, where essentially he just sweats a lot. And so while he was working on the factory floor, his sweat would get into the DNA uh, test kits, and um, wherever those DNA test kits wound up at crime scenes, they would be used and would contaminate the evidence. And they only got onto Wu's trail because Megan Hutchins' father was so adamant that um, her husband, his son-in-law, was the killer, and so when he, even though that the evidence pointed to a different person killing his daughter, um, and so Sherlock and Marcus look at another case and came to the same conclusion that despite um, evidence pointing to a different person, um, there was someone else involved. And so they looked at the DNA kits and found out that Wu's DNA had contaminated the DNA kits, and therefore it would contaminate these crime scene uh, DNA that they would collect. So there isn't actually any ghost of Brooklyn. Um, the people that the original investigators thought were the killers were actually the killers. And so now they're just looking for the just a killer in Caroline's case. Um, they find out that one of the well, Caroline was fostering dogs, and so there were 6 dogs that were supposed to be at the house, but 5 of them were only collected from the, I get, animal shelter or animal control people, and they're trying to figure out where the other dog is. Um, so they figure out that the dog that is missing bit someone, and so um, they try to look at hospital admittance to see if anyone went in to get treated for a dog bite. Um, while they wait for those results, they bring in the neighbor who argued with Caroline. He says that he confronted Caroline on a day that he on a specific day because her dogs kept barking and he was working from home that day and he was trying to work and all that. Um, and he says he wasn't even home the night she was killed, but he but says that they would have to talk to the whole neighborhood because they felt the same as him. Like, her dogs kept barking and they just wouldn't be quiet and all that. But he also thinks that she was a drug dealer because of the fact that, you know, um, he would see men coming over to her house all the time. Um, on one when they get back the list of people who went in for to get treated for dog bites, one of them is Zachary Fowler, who has stolen several phones as they're because they see that there are several phones on his desk or on the table by the front door. So they realize he stole a lot of phones, so therefore they arrest him on stealing. Um, So then Sherlock goes to meet Joan at Caroline's house, find out that there's some hair, pink human hair, in the bristles of a brush, and realize who it belonged to. But before they go talk with this person, Joan, asks Sherlock, "How did your meeting go with McNally this morning?" He's like, "Oh well, it went fine." She realizes his ass is lying, and so she confronts him about it. And he's like, "Well, okay, fine. Look, I've never talked with McNally this morning because he has no intention of stopping um, Reichenbach or whatever the fuck his name is." And he explains the reason why he didn't tell her is because um, Reichenbach has this um, threat out to Sherlock saying, well, if he decides to try to take him down, he's going to try to hurt everyone that Sherlock cares about. Um, so putting that aside, they go talk with Benjamin, the neighbor's wife, Diana, who was having an affair with Caroline. She says she saw what she thought was Caroline, or who she thought was Caroline, at 9 p.m. on the dot. The reason why she said she saw Caroline on 9 o'clock on the dot was because she takes her thyroid pill at that time, and this Caroline was leaving with the dog that's missing, Ollie. But Caroline was killed half an hour before, so obviously, um, they would, um, the person impersonating Caroline would have to be the same height and build as Caroline because Diana, was very intimate with Caroline's body and all that since they were having an affair. So it'd be kind of hard to fool Diana with, like a man person, let's say. Um, so, and they figured that it wasn't really Caroline's life they wanted to take. They wanted to take the dog because, as we will find out, Ollie used to be a canine dog who would sniff out drugs, specifically marijuana. Um, and we find this out from Officer Saldenbrook, who was, you would say, Ollie's partner. Um, and you know what confused me was um, Saldenbrook says, well, it's ironic that a marijuana sniffing dog gets placed into the care of someone who was selling marijuana. But what I didn't get was, how did he know about that? Because as far as I remembered, Marcus and Gregson didn't say that on screen. So I'm assuming they never told him that. But I guess they would have. But I mean, if we're assuming that they didn't tell him about it before being on screen, and they definitely didn't tell him about it while on screen, how did the fuck did he know? So that's what I didn't get. It's like, I guess you're supposed to assume that they told him, but I mean, unless you specifically, unless the characters specifically say something on screen, I'm gonna assume that they didn't say anything about it. So anyway, um, um, you find out that the marijuana that Caroline has on her property, um, basically belonged to this Mexican gang called Los Santiagos. Um, So Joan, Sherlock, and Marcus go speak with this Enrique Ruiz, who is a leader of this gang. Um, and while they go talk with him, he brings out his lawyer, so they can't really do much of anything. Um, when they leave, Sherlock gets told by Joan that she snapped pictures of a list of numbers and dates. She tells Sherlock that she thinks they are arrival and departure times, since she knows for a fact that none of the major sports teams like the NFL, the NBA, none of those types of sports have teams from those specific cities corresponding with those dates are playing each other at that particular time, at least not for another 3 to 4 months. So they figure they correspond with railway times and departures. Um, so at the train yard, they find Ollie there, and someone stole a shipment of Los Santiago's marijuana that was in the train. It was hidden in the train. So um, they realize that Enrique's lawyer is the sister of Zachary Fowler. Um, Fowler, I suppose, went to his sister's place to work at the wherever that is, and overheard Caroline talking with Enrique Ruiz about it or something, and so um, and he also heard about her dog Ollie, who is a marijuana sniffer. So he takes Ollie, kills Caroline in the process to steal the drugs. Um, so that's all for that storyline. The last scene you see is Odin Reichenbach and his assistant Antonia, or I assume is his assistant, riding in the back of a car, um, and Antonia is um, telling him about all the specific people that he is looking at, because that he thinks is trying to hurt people, and therefore he's trying to eliminate. Um, and then at the end, she tells him Joan reached out to the police department in Arizona and thinks that Joan suspects something had happened. She's like, well, do you want me to do something? But before she could finish her question, he's like, no, I'll take care of it. Which then goes to episode 10, the latest model. Um, Reichenbach comes to the brownstone, tells him everything that he knows is going on, and um, tells him that he also knows about Sherlock reaching out to several people trying to see if they would help him take down Reichenbach. Um, he tells them though that there's this man Wesley Conrad who he's only 80% sure is going to commit a murder or a crime. Um, and so he wants Sherlock and Jones' help to make sure that he is 100% sure that he's going to do what he um, uh, is thinking Conrad will do. Um, so Conrad is this guy who hosts a podcast on historical mysteries. And Conrad believes a British filmmaker named Bertram Ewan plagiarized one of Conrad's podcasts for a documentary that he made recently. Um, Conrad made it very clear over several social media posts that he was upset about this, and so he just wants them to help him figure out if it's actually true. So I'm gonna keep that storyline separate for right now and go on to the murder of the episode. There is this woman who is found on this, I guess you could say, tour of people who are murdered around the city type of thing. Um, she's classified as a Jane Doe for now because they don't know who she was. She didn't have any um, she didn't have any ID on her or anything like that. So she is pretty much dumped in the same spot where a woman named Autumn Cleary was put 18 years beforehand. And I mean, even though the method was different, they were still killed by asphyxiation. I mean, Autumn Cleary was strangled, and uh, this Jane Doe was suffocated with, I guess, a pillow, is what Marcus thought. Anyway, so eventually find out that this Jane Doe's name is um, Camille, and so they try to think of who killed Autumn to figure out who would kill Camille. Um, they realize that um, Autumn was killed by this man named Hampton Vanderway, and his wife Erica essentially um, confirms that she thinks he killed Autumn. And the only reason why she didn't say anything was because she knew that Autumn and Hampton were secretly lovers. Even though, well, secretly lovers because Autumn had a boyfriend and, Hampton has a wife. So they kind of had to be secret lovers and all that. Um, so she didn't want to say anything because, they had kids who were young at the time, and um, she didn't want them to grow up knowing that the father was a murderer or anything like that. So eventually they realized that Camille was murdered not because um, of a connection to Autumn, but of another reason. Um, and it just happens to be that they were dumped in the same spot by coincidence. um, Camille has his older sister named Regina, who was addicted to heroin. And so Regina um, tried and failed to get clean several times, from what I gather. And she finally got clean when she became pregnant by the man she was seeing named Amos, who is a DJ who uses a panda suit to mask his identity. So they initially thought, Amos was the one who killed her, but um, it wasn't him. And so um, they find out that the woman that Regina went to see um, is part of an organization who helps young women who are addicted to drugs. And they figure out that this woman that Regina went to, was a middleman for women who were addicted to drugs who became pregnant. And take she would help these young women get in touch with a certain adoption agency who would help put the babies up for adoption. And when the woman found out that Regina had decided not to put her baby up for adoption, she killed Regina because of the fact that um, she would have lost out on her cut of um, the money that the adoptive parents would have given the adoption agency and to Regina for giving up her baby. So that's pretty much the mystery of the episode. Um, Now back to Odin Reichenbach. While the case is unfolding, they read through Sherlock and Joan read through the files that Reichenbach has on Wesley Conrad. Turns out that the reason why Conrad is saying that Ewan has plagiarized Conrad's stuff is because in 1910 there was these four siblings in England who were playing cards one night, and this is the official story, by the way. The While they were playing cards, the four siblings saw what they thought was a beast outside of their window. One of the siblings, I don't remember his name, went to go check it out, but upon not finding anything, went home. So Conrad thinks, the sibling that went outside to check everything and make sure that what they saw wasn't really a beast. Um, he threw this very rare poisonous root or poisonous plant into the fire that was still burning, and his intention was to kill his siblings with this poisonous plant, with the toxins that were released by the fire, to kill his siblings so that he can inherit the family fortune. Ewan made this documentary stating the exact same thing. And so Conrad started to sue Ewan both in New York and in London, to get him to either stop showing this documentary or pay him some money or whatever. But Conrad's lawsuit is not going so well. So they read in the Reichenbach's research that Conrad not only researched the layout of the theater that Ewan is showing his documentary at, but looking into firearms as well, though Conrad hadn't really made any purchases, so there's no evidence that he purchased anything. So, um, what they do also see is that Conrad made this very large cash withdrawal right before he went to on a vacation to Vermont, which has apparently a pretty lax gun law or several gun laws. So it also turns out that on the same weekend that um, Conrad went to Vermont, there was a gun show. So he could very well have bought a gun at this gun show. Um, Charlotte goes to speak with Conrad and tells Conrad, there's this law firm that has offices in both London and New York who would be willing to work on commission only, meaning they would get nothing until he wins his lawsuit. Um, that's the end of that until Sherlock goes to tell um, Reichenbach about this, and um, Reichenbach is like, the situation isn't handled like Sherlock was just saying to him. Um, and Reichenbach is like, this isn't England or London specifically where people can't get a hold of firearms as easily. People can get firearms very easily in this country. So, this is after Sherlock goes to Conrad's parents' house, where Conrad is staying because the lawsuit is depleted his money source. Um, and so Sherlock took Conrad's gun that he found in the basement of his Conrad's parents' house, and so Sherlock and proposes to Reichenbach, why don't you change your ways and all that. Um, and Reichenbach is like, well, if I change my ways, will you and Joan start working with me? And Sherlock's like, well, call me and find out. Um, at the end of the episode, um, Sherlock and Joan are called to Reichenbach's house, office, and they find out that Conrad not only killed his parents, but killed himself. And Reichenbach was like, if I had my way, he wouldn't have killed anyone because I had this feeling he was a killer no matter what, regardless of if he actually hurt Ewan or it was his parents and himself. Um, and he's like, well, I was considering changing my methods, but now that Connor killed himself and his parents, I'm not going to. So he kicks them out. Um, so I personally think that um, it was awfully convenient that Conrad first killed his parents and then killed himself. If he had, I mean, I guess one could make the argument that because he had his guns taken away from him, even though he didn't know it was Sherlock, or we assume he didn't know. We assume he didn't know that it was Sherlock who took his gun. Um, I mean, we could assume that he then was like, fuck, my gun is gone. I can't kill Ewan or hurt him at the very least. Um, so I'm gonna go kill my parents and myself. But I mean, you also have to remember that Sherlock helped him get a law firm that would help him essentially pro bono until he wins. So I mean, it doesn't really make sense because that he would kill himself, kill his parents, and then kill himself um, after not being able to kill Ewan. Because I mean, he was worried about not having any money left to continue fighting Ewan to on the plagiarizing lawsuit, and so um, Sherlock gave him a way out, and so you would think that he wouldn't kill not only himself and his parents because Sherlock stole or someone stole his gun. You would think that he would be ramped up to you know continue his lawsuit and all that. So I personally think that Reichenbach still killed Conrad, but made it look like Conrad not only killed his parents but killed himself, like staged it as a murder suicide because or double murder suicide because he still wanted Conrad out of the picture because he still felt, despite Sherlock having a point that um, Reichenbach doesn't have um, a real reason to suspect Conrad of killing anymore. Um, he was like, well, it just Conrad had or Reichenbach has this notion that no matter what, people are going to kill others, and so I think he made that ruse of well, he Conrad killed his parents. I mean, so yeah, I just don't see how that isn't too much of a coincidence, and personally, I think that um, they will figure this out um and I believe I made this prediction uh when I was first doing these recaps of the seventh season that Sherlock or Joan or possibly even both of them are going to get killed if not hurt by the season finale. um and um somehow that will be the reason why the show has ended because one or both of them have died and everyone has to go living on life some way somehow. So that's what I think is going to happen in the next three episodes is that they're going to figure out Reichenbach killed Conrad, made it look like he killed his parents and then killed himself because he for whatever reason. So um I guess I'll find out in the next three episodes. But until then, I will see you guys later.